Of course, in the lead, thanks Buhler, President Ramaphosa is between a rock and a hard place at the moment. He has become the first ANC president under whom the party secured less than 50% of the votes in any election. Now, Twitter has been abuzz with the hashtag Ramaphosa must go. The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal has blamed its poor performance in the local government election on disgruntled party supporters who decided not to vote. The party secured 42.02% of the votes and lost its outright majority in the eThekwini municipality. To make matters even worse, residents of Dalton Hostel in Umbilo in Durban went on the rampage in what appears to be post-election violence. Now, to weigh in on this matter and others, we're joined by political analyst, Professor Sipho Seape. Prof, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Throughout the election campaign, the ANC has essentially been banking on its president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is much more popular than his party. He's been the face of the campaign. He's been out there trying to woo supporters. And come the outcome of these elections now, the poor results have brought out all the critics, putting President Ramaphosa in a tight spot.
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be indicated that the ANC went into these elections on the back foot, in the sense that since 2017, the party has been obsessed with its own internal issues. Every time there's a report about the ANC, it's all about how it is dealing with its own members. And when it did so badly. Secondly, this is the same party that could not even pay its own workers. So if you can't even pay people who work for you, and because there is a commitment and a contract that you have with them, how can the citizens of this country believe that the contract that you want to sign with them will be honored? So that's the first thing. The second thing is this lie that has been repeated so many times, that Cyril Ramaphosa is more popular than the ANC. This is a creation of mainly the mainstream media. If you look at Cyril Ramaphosa's campaigning, you've seen a person, he's the first president of the ANC to be continually booed in a number of places. Even when he went to vote in his hometown in Shawela, Soweto, he was actually booed on the day in which he was casting his vote. He had been to places like Naledi in Soweto, where he could not stay a long time because the residents there did not want him and they were raising issues. He was being heckled from one place to another. So the notion of somebody being popular, maybe he might be popular in the suburbs, but what we have seen, which has been recorded, is the booing of the president by ordinary members of society. So that this is the first problem that the ANC had, that instead of being on the ground, it relied on analysts like ourselves to tell its stories that are not true on the ground. So what you saw is that the obsession that the ANC has had with itself has led the voters to punish it, to say, even if you guys think you are leading, even if you think you are dealing with issues of renewal, you've forgotten about us. So the outcome does not come as a surprise. It should be a wake-up call to the ANC to say, what are the assumptions that we made when we went to this election? One of those is really to say, oh, our president is so popular. They should have seen, actually, they went to an extent of saying the president must not go to certain places because he might be embarrassed. So that reality does not accord with the notion that you are more popular than the ANC. Yes, he may be popular in the ANC because he's the president of the ANC, and you may also have people who are very racist, who belong to other parties, who would rather have him than to have the ANC. Actually, John Steenhuisen of the DA had said they are more comfortable with working with the Cyril Ramaphosa and his faction, not so much about the ANC. They say, for as long as we have Cyril Ramaphosa leading the ANC, we're comfortable. But they were making a statement that he's our man. So from that perspective, you could actually say he might be liked beyond the ANC. But the notion that translates into a popular vote on the ground, at least the voters have told us that those assumptions and those assessments were not true.
I mean, Professor, if you make a lucid assessment of the politicking in the run-up to the local government elections, as you mentioned, the president was booed. How much of the ANC's decline, as a result, can be laid squarely at President Cyril Ramaphosa's feet? And if he goes out, who comes in?
Well, the interesting thing about that question is that whenever you had other leaders, when Malimane lost badly in the last election, many people said he had to step down. And when Jacob Zuma also fared badly, there was also the same issue. But the point is, people are saying the buck stops with the president. But you can't simply blame that on him. You have to blame the entire collective leadership that is comprising of the NEC, because the direction comes from the ANC. The president might actually lead in terms of provoking and initiating certain discussions, but ultimately the resolutions must be taken by the NEC of the ANC. For instance, if you take the issue of step aside, which had created confusion and squabbles within the ANC, because some people within the ANC saw that as a decision to settle political scores using the state institutions. And that did not go well within the ANC, but the NEC of the ANC supported that. And members of the ANC who are supporters of individuals who have been implicated or suggested to be implicated in forms of corruption have also said, no, guys, what about this one? What about that one? So these inconsistencies are a result of decisions that are made by the NEC. So it cannot be only one person. In the same way that we can say, if things went wrong under any other president, the entire leadership of the ANC must take responsibility. And anyway, in terms of our constitution, especially in government, when a government makes mistakes, the constitution says all ministers are individually and collectively accountable. And the ANC has always preached the whole notion of collective responsibility. So it cannot be right that it is only narrowed to the president. But where the ANC made the mistake is to say, let him become the face of the campaign. And as a result, people are saying, this is the man. His face is the face we associate with failure. So the ANC must deal with that. But I don't think you can squarely put everything on one person.
Prof, if you speak about not putting squarely the blame on one individual, and according to some of the trends we've seen with these polls, we've seen that a lot of observers and analysts have spoken about the ANC essentially now being on a downward spiral, saying that come 2024, these results will even be more telling of where the ANC is standing in the midst of the political tensions, the factions, and the corruption, and of course service delivery, which has been the entire focus of these elections?
Well, first of all, like I said, the ANC has been sent a rude awakening. And part of it is that the ANC, if you were to look at and scroll through the media, the coverage has been about how it's dealing with its own people. You've seen people getting arrested by the NPA, and the NPA is not even able to advance the case. And once they are arrested and charged, then there's a step aside. Then you have other people where there's also clear elements of malfeasance, where there are reports. You don't see the ANC jumping and say, oh, let's deal with corruption, and if people are implicated, then step aside, as the resolution of the ANC in a conference suggested. But you have only those who are charged, and the charging is a state function. So you find that the confluence and conflation of state functions with party functions. If the ANC sees its people to be corrupt, it must deal with it. It must not deal with them through state organs, because then when you do that, people see the ANC as using state institutions to settle political scores. So that's the first thing that they must deal with. Second issue is that when they deal with corruption, they must be consistent. It cannot be that if certain people who belong to a particular faction are implicated, then you turn your blind eye. But when there are other people, there's a hurried movement to deal with those people. When you do that, you undermine the integrity of even the process that you want to embark on of a renewal. So that's the one thing. The third thing is that the ANC must start listening to the people. It must stop misleading itself with surveys that are conducted in a manner that are so biased to give a wrong impression. So for those people who thought for instance, there was a view that says if Jacob Zuma goes, South Africa's problems would go. Instead, what we have, things have become worse. I mean, the president goes around making a lot of promises like, oh, load shedding will be a thing of the past. And the following day, you have load shedding. So he should stop, and the ANC must stop making promises that they cannot fulfill. So that is the biggest problem that the ANC faces. It must accept that we have capacity issues. It must accept that it has its own internal problems, but when it deals with those, it must be consistent. It could not be that you want to use those as a way of removing certain people from the political space.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time and that very thorough analysis. Political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe there, speaking to some of the internal matters in the ANC as the hashtag Ramaphosa must go has been making rounds on the social media streams.